You're listening to Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty. Birding, or birdwatching, is booming. The US Fish and Wildlife Service estimates there are 96 million birders in the United States. That's 1 in 3 adults in this country. And even if you aren't one of them, you may just be birdwatching by default.
All of us are bird watchers to some extent, even if you've never really thought about it.
That's Ann Paul, president of the Tampa Audubon and Florida Ornithological Society. In about 5 minutes, you'll hear more from Ann and others about birdwatching's soaring popularity. But first, come on a bird walk with Florida Matters executive producer and resident birder, Grayson Doctor.
Picture this. It's 3 in the afternoon and you're out walking the dog, say a poodle named Winnie, and you tune out for a second while they're sniffing a bush. Then you pick up on the whistling of a bird nearby, then a low cooing from another one. Suddenly, numerous birds are chirping from everywhere. So you pull out your phone and you open up your favorite bird app, and it observes the birdsong happening all around you. It's a mockingbird. And a blue jay. And a fish crow. That's been me ever since I went on a bird walk at Tampa's Lettuce Lake Park. I started bird watching unintentionally in 2019 when I would sit by the pond daily and just watch the duck and geese activity. I may have mentioned this growing passion a few times at work. So the Florida Matters team pushed me out on a bird walk. Today's event is a bird watch walk, and we're going to walk around the park. We're going to travel down to the boardwalk, and we're going to see some river birds, and who knows what else we'll find. Oh, was I in for a treat.
Did you find
So,
it?
the animal that's leading the branches up there is a squirrel.
Look straight up.
But are you seeing something else?
Yeah, it's a woodpecker.
You got a woodpecker?
Yeah. Oh, he just moved, but he's like on this tree right here.
There he is.
Oh, okay. Pileated woodpecker right over our heads.
That head is so bright red. He's so
So
beautiful.
can you guys find him?
There he is.
Oh, that was so cool. I love how they fly.
Needless to say, I was very excited to see the pileated woodpecker. For me, a lifer. A lifer is when you see a bird for the first time, almost like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I saw and heard a few that day, including some birds I was already familiar with. It was about 10 of us on the walk. The Tampa Audubon Society hosts a beginner's bird walk every month. This one was led by Ann Paul.
We've got a couple cormorants up in this tree over here. So cormorants and ehingas are physically similar but unrelated. Yeah, they're big birds, and they're smaller than an eagle or a goose even.
For most of us in the group, this was our first bird walk, like Denise Bency, who, like a lot of us, mostly watches birds in her yard.
I have feeders out in my backyard. I like to just casually look at them, but this is my first actual bird walk with somebody who's really knowledgeable about birds, telling us about all the different species.
For others, like Kristen Orr, this walk was their introduction to a new hobby.
I grew up with grandparents who were really interested in them. They even had mourning doves in their home as pets. So that's always been like an interesting thing for me, but never to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, let me go bird watching. Like that's not a thing that I thought to do, but I'm glad I did. Yeah.
Is this something that you would continue doing? Maybe a hobby that you'll pick up?
Absolutely. Absolutely something that I want to do over and over again, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really exciting when you can see, like we saw that woodpecker today. Did you see the woodpecker? Yeah, it's really exciting when you see birds that you don't see all the time. Even sometimes, like I see cardinals all the time, but to see them like this today has been amazing.
Even to hear them, right? And then the things that you don't really notice. It's like, wait a minute, I hear that at home, but never really paying attention or never even putting a name to the sound.
For everyone, this was a great experience to see some amazing and talented birds. Grayson Doctor, WUSF 89.7 News.
And you can see photos from Grayson's bird walk at Lettuce Lake on WUSF.org. The popularity of birdwatching is growing, and you're about to hear more about the appeal of birdwatching and why young people in particular are flocking to the hobby. Well, we're joined by WUSF's Kerry Sheridan. She reported in February on kids getting into bird watching in part because of the pandemic. Also with us, Anne Paul, who is president of the Tampa Audubon and Florida Ornithological Society, and Kara Cook, Suncoast rooftop biologist with Audubon Florida. Thank you all for being here. Anne, I want to start with you. What is birding, and is there a difference between a bird watcher and a birder?
I don't know that there's a difference. I think that all of us are bird watchers to some extent, even if you've never really thought about it. Everybody knows, for instance, what a crow is, what a robin is, what an eagle is. If you've seen the side of the post office truck, you know what an eagle looks like. So, but there are some of us who are super interested in watching birds because of the joy that it gives us. And so you have people who watch birds from in their backyard at their feeders, and then you have others who go on field trips to find birds, and then you have some of the real enthusiasts who travel literally around the world to see the different species of birds. They're what we call listers, so they list the birds that they've seen. They keep track of how many they've seen in a month, how many they've seen in the county, how many they've seen in the state, how many they've seen in the United States, and then how many they've seen in the world. And a few years ago, there was a movie about this, what you can only call a fanaticism, called The Big Year. You may have seen it, several years old now, but Jack Black and Steve Martin starred. And it was super. If you haven't seen it, you may want to see it. It tells the real story of birds and why people really enjoy watching birds.
So for you, what is it that you love about it? What's the joy for you from bird watching?
Well, we can watch birds. Birds are up in the daytime when we're up. We can, using binoculars or spotting scopes, which are just telescopes that you can use for birds on tripods and so forth. But with binoculars, you can watch birds do all of their behaviors without disturbing them. So you can watch birds feeding, you can watch them preening, you can watch them flying, you can watch them mating, you can watch them taking care of their young. And birds are interesting because they are doing all of these things as individuals. There's no kindness in the bird world. Remember, these animals are descended from dinosaurs, and not just any dinosaurs, but, the Tyrannosaurus rex types. Obviously not that big, but yeah, we're just really lucky they're smaller than us, because otherwise we would definitely be in the, prey range, because they eat everything. Birds are definitely predators. Some of them are seed predators like doves and pigeons. And the birds that come to your feeder, like cardinals or tufted titmice or Carolina chickadees in our area. And then other birds eat other birds. So you may be watching the swallowtail kites, which have just, this is such a great story. They spend their winter in South America on the pampas of Argentina, and they have just arrived back here to our area of Florida to nest. But they eat dragonflies as well as nestling birds, which they spot from the sky. They are such a beautiful flyer. They may be one of my favorite birds.
There's no kindness in the bird world, but there is in the bird watching world, right? There's a real sense of community. And I want to bring you into this conversation, Kerry, because you talked to some young bird watchers, including a 10th grader named Sophie, and she said she'd been birding half her life. What was it that got her interested in bird watching?
Yeah, I think she was just drawn to them naturally. But then when the pandemic hit about 5 years ago, she found herself at home quite a bit. And there was a lake near where they lived, and there were a lot of wading birds there, herons and egrets and roseate spoonbills. And she just started watching them and was very captivated by them. And her mom said, well, why don't you make this a research project? Take more pictures, write down what you see. And that's how it all got started for her.
And she was on a bird walk with some other young birders. You went along too. What was that like? Who else was part of that group?
This is the Minnesota chapter of the Florida Young Birders Club, and these are all kids aged between 9 and 17 and their parents, and they organize regular outings where they go out looking for something. So on this particular walk, it was an owl walk. We were walking through Redbug Slough in Sarasota and following a wildlife photographer and listening to him for tips on how to find owls. And it was just such a fun evening. You know, you start out at about 4:30. You don't know what you're going to see. You might see one, you might not. You're just kind of on the hunt. And all these kids with their binoculars, and some had cameras, and they all had a lot of knowledge about different things and just curiosity. I asked one little boy, what is it that you like about birding? And he's like, oh, just the colors, the personalities, the people. You know, they just love being together and being outdoors. And it was just such a fun night.
Now, Kara Cook, you are a rooftop biologist in the Suncoast area with Audubon. What does a rooftop biologist do?
Yeah, so I don't think there's too many rooftop biologists in the U.S. So it's actually kind of unique. So due to increased development and human activity on our beaches in Florida, many of our beach nesting birds have lost a lot of suitable nesting habitat. And kind of in order to survive in this human-dominated landscape, they have taken to nesting on tar and gravel rooftops. We actually have quite a few in our area, especially in Pinellas County. We do have some sites that become active in Hillsborough County as well. But basically, the substrate of the gravel on the rooftop is very similar to what you would find them nesting on at the beach. The beaches are shelly and sandy, so they have found this alternative, substrate to nest on. There's pretty much very low human disturbance on rooftops, and you're not going to get the same predators that we would get on the beach, like raccoons, dogs, cats. They have other pressures on rooftops, but they've kind of found this little niche, and they have been very successful using that over the years. But yeah, unfortunately, we are losing these gravel rooftops because they re-roof as they age, and it's just not like a typical substrate that you would replace it with. There's newer materials out there.
And what kind of birds can people see in the Tampa Bay region? You mentioned the swallow-tailed kite before, and you talked about some other, I guess, more commonplace birds as well. But what can people expect to catch a glimpse of here in the Tampa Bay region?
That is such a good question. We in Florida can expect to see over 500 species of birds if we really get busy at it. And that's because we are fortunate. Florida sticks out like a thumb south into what is really the tropics. So we have tropical birds like roseate spoonbills and so forth. And then we have the birds from North America. And during migration, when birds that nest up in the Arctic on the tundra fly south to spend the winter in Central or South America, a lot of them fly down this Atlantic flyway through Florida. Mm-hmm. So they're coming down in the fall, down past Florida to Cuba, and then they fly west to the west end of Cuba and hop across 90 miles to the Yucatan Peninsula, and all of a sudden they're in Central America.
It's amazing how far these tiny creatures can fly, right? And
then, of course, they're coming back in the spring. Mm-hmm. Migration is one of the wonders of the natural world. And I think we are, those of us who are tuned into it, and this is one of the things you can literally tune into. There are apps where you can go online and see what is migrating. And then when they get to a stopover spot, like, for instance, the Tampa Bay area, we can go bird watching for them in the spring and the fall and see them as they're on their way with migration. So we are just really lucky. We have more birds here recorded in Florida than almost all the rest of the United States.
Wow.
California beats us, and Texas beats us. But that's okay. We'll let them have that.
Have you noticed some big trends too? Like, are there more people showing an interest in your field trips, or just saying, I want to join the club? Like, what are you seeing in terms of your chapter?
We have about 900 members in the Tampa area, and we are constantly getting new members. And they're coming on our field trips, they're coming to our meetings, and they're joining us just online anyway. And it's just such a pleasure to meet them and hear their stories, where they're from. And of course, we want to talk about the birds.
Kerry, what did you find in your reporting with these young birders and thinking about birding in generally, the popularity of it? What have you found?
Well, people are really drawn to the joy that comes with walking in nature. And when I first started looking for owls with this young group, I was thinking about my audio equipment, and I was walking looking down. And something started to happen up above us where an eagle and an osprey were fighting over something. They were fighting over a fish. And I was like, oh, and I started to look up, and I realized I missed the beginning of it. And one of the young birders said to me, you always have to keep your head up. You always have to look up and around. And I realized I had been walking with my head down. Mm-hmm. So I just thought, oh, what a great just metaphor for life. You know, you have to look up, you have to look around, you have to be willing to absorb what's around you. And these kids really get that. When I called about the numbers, I was curious, is this really becoming more popular nationwide? And the Cornell Lab of Ornithology told me that consulting U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey data, yes, absolutely. Since between 2016 and 2022, when they last measured it, the number of people who report watching wildlife near their homes or out on walks has really, really risen in all age groups. In children, it's gone up 3 to 4 times what it was just 5 years ago. But even older people who have historically and continue to make up the bulk of bird watchers, their numbers are growing too.
Do they know why?
Well, among the young people, it is particularly the pandemic. They think that kids being unable to go to school or being kept inside or having to, not be around people when the coronavirus pandemic was going on really forced them outdoors into nature and to just seeing the natural world around them. So a lot of them picked up that interest then and have continued on with it. As far as the older people, I'm not sure. Could be a similar thing.
You're listening to Florida Matters and a conversation about bird watching in Tampa Bay. You're hearing from Ann Paul, president of the Tampa Audubon and Florida Ornithological Society, Kara Cook, Suncoast rooftop biologist with Audubon, Florida, and WUSF's Kerry Sheridan. Coming up, stories about why people get into birding in the first place and what does a birder think about switching up Florida's state bird. You're listening to Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty. And you're hearing a conversation about bird watching in Tampa Bay with Ann Paul, president of the Tampa Audubon and Florida Ornithological Society, Kara Cook, Suncoast rooftop biologist with Audubon, Florida, and WUSF's Kerry Sheridan. So I think everybody here in this panel has a story about how they got interested in bird watching. What drew you to it first, Kerry?
Well, about 10 years ago, I was working for the French news agency, AFP, Agence France Presse, and I was covering science, and there was a breeding facility for whooping cranes in Maryland, where they were people who were trying to bring back these really critically endangered birds. And they would dress up in these big, bulky kind of white suits so that they didn't look like people while they were, tending to the birds and helping them incubate their eggs and feeding them and stuff like that. So I got to dress up in one of those bird suits and go into this pen.
So you were dressed, was it like a kind of a Halloween bird costume? Is that what it looked like? Or was it sort of more like camouflage?
Well, it wasn't feathers or anything like that. But it was like a big white sheet kind of with a hat, kind of a cap, and your face was covered, but you had kind of a screen that you could see through. So almost maybe like a beekeeper sort of.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I could see these cranes just walking around very close to me and just unperturbed by my existence. And it was just so cool.
Kara, how did you get into ornithology, bird watching?
Well, I grew up kind of out in the countryside in Missouri, and in the wintertime, you get kind of cooped up because of all the snow and cold. So we would feed the birds and we would watch them all winter. And then in the summertime, we would put out the hummingbird feeders and we would get like 30 or 40 or more ruby-throated hummingbirds at our feeders, and just watching them being territorial and just how much they have to come back and forth to eat. I just really enjoyed that as a kid, and I went to school for fisheries and wildlife sciences, and I took an ornithology course while I was in undergrad, and I really just fell in love with it and was able to get out in the field a lot there. So that's kind of what started it.
And when did you start getting interested in bird watching?
Well, I went to school at Cornell, and I was really interested in birds then, but I really got involved when I was living in San Antonio, Texas, and I was a member of the Bear Audubon Society there, BEXAR, Bear Audubon, and I went on some field trips with them. And I think I was late for a field trip, and I missed the group, so I thought, well, I'll just catch up. And I came across a bush, and in this bush was a little bird that was colored black and white. And I thought to myself, that might be a warbler. I mean, here I am. I know nothing, really. And it was a black and white warbler. And I had identified it all by myself without anybody telling me. I was just thrilled to death. And that was kind of, I can do this. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's when we learn something that makes a difference to us, that's a spark.
Kara, I wanted to ask you about some of the challenges that birds face. And because you're the rooftop biologist, you're kind of looking at how birds are adapting to, changes in their environment. What can you tell us about birds that make their home in the Tampa Bay region that may be threatened or endangered?
Yeah, so we have several species that are state listed as threatened. And we do have a couple that are in the state that are federally endangered, like the roseate tern. That one doesn't hang out too much here in Tampa, but we do have several species like black skimmers, least terns, the snowy plovers, Wilson's plovers. Those species are all very sensitive to human disturbance, as well as they really don't understand that a dog is not the same thing as a coyote. They can't tell the difference. So when somebody brings their dog near a nesting site on a beach, that can cause them to completely abandon their nest. And, the people that have the dog, they might not have no idea that could happen. So we really try to be out on the beaches and educate and steward, really talk about the birds and kind of protecting them. We have people all over the United States that visit Florida beaches. So it's not just our local people that we are talking to and educating.
The Florida scrub jay, too, is something that we have seen quite a lot of news headlines on. What makes this particular bird so important?
Well, the Florida scrub jay is the only bird that only exists in Florida. Scrub jays in all the world, the only place they are is in Florida. Mm-hmm. And they are related to crows and blue jays and magpies and ravens. They are super intelligent. And they live on the high beach dunes in central Florida, or where those dunes are or were back over time. If you've studied Florida geology, you know that the high dunes were placed there when the sea levels were different.
And what are some of the best spots for bird watching around Tampa Bay? And if you're listening to this and you're interested in getting into birding, what do you do? Like, what do you need to bring with you? Because it sounds to me like you could go out there with just your eyes and look around, but there must be some level of kind of equipment that would make it easier to birdwatch, right?
Well, binoculars. If you can get binoculars, and I always tell people, buy the most expensive binoculars that you can.
So what are you looking at in terms of how much could you spend on a pair of binoculars?
Well, you can spend a lot of money on binoculars, up to $2,000+
Wow.
But you can buy a really good pair of binoculars for, say, $150. But I would recommend spending like $300 or $400. If you think about any other hobby that you were going to take up, if you were going to go into golfing, what would you spend on golf clubs and then, rental of carts and stuff? You'd spend a lot of money. So it's okay. And you will use these for the rest of your life. So binoculars really help. And the reason they help is they bring the sight of what the birds are doing right to your eyes. Places where you can go and we are so lucky. We have so many really good places. But one of the best places in the United States is here at Fort DeSoto County Park. And you can go and see a wide variety of birds there. Again, a good thing to do is find out where your local Audubon chapter is taking field trips and just go on them because they're going to the fun spots. Tampa Audubon offers a beginning birding class the first Saturday of every month at Lettuce Lake Park, which is a super place to go and do bird watching. There are so many places. Celery Fields, as Carrie was saying, down in Sarasota. Honeymoon Island is superb for bird watching, particularly for the beach birds and the migrant birds, snowy plovers and so forth. But I bird watch everywhere. I mean, I'll be stopping at a light and I'm watching, and there'll be an eagle fly over. So watch the traffic. Don't do what I do. But I think the point is birds are all around us, and we are so lucky in Florida because we have so many birds. And if you're interested in birds, start out with the big ones that are easy to see. The wading birds. We have so many beautiful herons here, plus spoonbills and so forth, which are magnificent to watch. You can watch them feeding and just really neat. Go on field trips. It's just so much fun. What Carrie was talking about, the joy, you can garnish this joy for your own life by bird watching.
As we wrap up here, I wanted to get your thoughts on the debate over whether to change Florida's state bird. And what do you think of that?
Well, everybody loves the mockingbird, which is our current state bird. But we share that bird with other states, and we do have a bird that only occurs in Florida, which is the Florida scrub jay. The other bird that's been brought up is the flamingo. And the flamingos are now in Florida due particularly to Hurricane Irma, I think it was, that brought in. And they have been in the distant past. John James Audubon found flamingos when he was here in the 1835. But that being said, I have to go for the scrub jay. It's just a remarkably interesting, fabulous bird and so much fun to see.
Well, we've been speaking with Ann Paul, president of the Tampa Audubon and Florida Ornithological Society. Ann, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're so welcome. Fun to be here.
Also joining us, Kara Cook, Suncoast rooftop biologist with Audubon Florida. Kara, thank you.
Thank you so much. And just real quick, I wanted to mention we have a ton of volunteer opportunities all throughout the Tampa Bay region. We have beach nesting bird season that started just a couple days ago. So if you want to get involved, you can reach out to me from the Audubon Florida website. And if you need more information, just feel free to reach out.
And Kerry Sheridan with WSF. Kerry, thanks so much. And you can find more of Kerry's reporting on birding, painted buntings, and more on WSF.org. Appreciate your insights as well.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
That's Florida Matters for this week. And this note on the way out, last week you heard from WSF's Sky LeBron about people in Tampa Bay suffering through ongoing flooding months after Hurricane Milton. After Sky's report, the Federal Emergency Management Agency contacted him, and since then FEMA has also reached out to all the people who shared their stories about flooding problems. Florida Matters executive producer is Grayson Doctor, production assistants from Jackson Harp and Blake Bass. Subscribe to Florida Matters wherever you get your podcasts and watch on YouTube. I'm Matthew Petty. Thank you for listening.